Hey you guys, welcome back to In the Wild. Rayshawn here, and today we have a interesting episode in store for you guys because we're going to talk a little bit about relationships. And as you guys know, whether you're a college student or employee, relationships change when you step into a new environment, and especially for a new student who may be experiencing relationship changes for the first time, and particularly for friendships and like those friend breakups. So I'm really excited to talk to two of our counselors in student counseling and psychological services. They are well equipped and trained to handle all sorts of conversations, and I'm very excited for them to talk to us about how they would handle some of the things like, yeah, like I feel like my best friend from high school or my best friend from my freshman year, like it's no longer a relationship that I feel like I can maintain, or something happened and I need to kind of close that chapter in my life. How do we handle those things? That's a conversation we don't always get to have, but today we're going to have it. So I hope you're ready, because here we go. Welcome, Yamil and Tracy. Tracy, welcome back, and Yamil, welcome for being on In the Wild for the first time. Excited to have you both. For our listeners, can you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do at Student Counseling and Psychological Services?
Thank you. Sure. My name is Tracy Weston. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and at Student Counseling and Psychological Services, I see clients, and I also work as the assistant director and clinical coordinator.
And I'm Yamil. I'm a counselor here. I'm in the Somerville campus, and I also work in individual therapy, group therapy, and I'm also the coordinator for virtual services. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, like I said, really excited to have y'all. I always love talking about mental health and just how that just impacts the well-being of our students here at the university. So thank you for what you do. But I'm kind of curious, and Tracy probably answered this before when you've been on the show, but what kind of led you into this field of work, and for college students in particular?
That's a good question, and I've been asked that question a bunch of times, and
Okay.
you would think I will have like this really like thought out response, but the truth is that I feel like I sort of fell into counseling, and I kind of found my way into counseling also in the college setting. My interest at first was teaching, and it took some feedback from people, and talking about them feeling like I would be a good fit in the counseling world. And with time, some exploration, some acceptance, I found my way into the clinical counseling program here at Augusta University. And my experience here at Augusta University was overall very positive. And I kind of wanted to stay involved in academia as well. So doing counseling in a college setting like made sense for me, and I was very lucky and fortunate to also find a job here at SCAP. So
It's nice to hear that.
yeah.
Nice to learn those parts of you.
What about you, Tracy?
It was an accident,
A happy accident.
a happy accident. Like Emil, I ended up in a master's program here, not in psychology, but in, counselor education. And I transitioned from being a journalist for a very long time. And how many of you read newspapers? That's the reason I'm here now. There was not much to do, not much left to do in newspapers. And I worked with a career coach and found my way to the counselor education program. And at student counseling, I've worked as a graduate assistant, an intern, a part-time counselor, a full-time counselor, and now assistant director. So it's I'm very happy to be here in this setting with these colleagues and with emerging adults. I think they're fun, and I just respect so much their willingness to take care of themselves in these ways. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you both for sharing. And for the episode for today, we're talking about relationships and just how they change over time, especially for when someone goes to college, because emerging adults will be experiencing so many different changes with all of their existing relationships. So I was curious, like, what are some of the common things that a student might experience when they start having those relationship changes?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind for me is that in college, when it comes to relationships, all of a sudden you have access to new relationships you didn't have access before. And I don't mean that just in that you meet more people, but also the kind of relationships that you're forming. So I think before college, if you're talking about someone who is in high school and then going to college, most relationships are going to be either like family, friends, and then some romantic, relationships. But in college, you also now have access to professional, relationships, and now you have to think about that. Like, how do you navigate the professional world? You also now have this idea of networking, and building connections with people, even if you're not going to see them on a everyday basis. And also, I think one thing too is that you have now more independence as well, which that comes with some pros and that comes with some cons. When it comes to relationships, I think it means that now you have to be a bit more intentional to keep those relationships, to nurture and foster those relationships. So those are some big changes that come to mind that you start to experience in college. And if you haven't experienced them at some point in college, you will experience, that change and that more diverse pool of relationships.
And diverse people.
Right.
Recalling,
That's a good point, yeah.
where I grew up, my experience was I grew up in a small town. I felt like I knew everyone in the small town, and a lot of the people looked like me, talked like me, walked like me, right? And we had common interests and common histories. And I started out at a large school in South Carolina and transferred after one semester. And I've often thought my transferring to a smaller liberal arts college opened the door to just more variety of people. And I really appreciated that. I think that if I had stayed at the larger university, and who knows, really who knows, but I feel like if I had stayed there, I would have just stayed with people who were like me.
Right.
And my life was, it just really opened up to find different people with different values, different histories, upbringing, backgrounds. I think that was a really rich part of college for me.
Yeah, even thinking about my time here, coming to Augusta, because I'm not from here, living with different people, and you're right, like, you get to experience people that are from completely different walks of life, have completely different belief systems, and for me, at the my first year, it's like, oh, these people think so differently than me, and then on one hand, you're like, oh, they're doing things wrong. Like, you're washing dishes wrong, or you're doing all this stuff differently. But then once you have enough roommates or experience and get to know them, then you realize, like, they're not just doing things wrong. That's just how they do it. It's just differently. Hence, new relationships kind of forming and all that good stuff. For just learning from different people and how they exist or coexist along with you.
Yeah, it's very different, and it also I think leads you to grow, right, and to kind of
Right.
like challenge your idea of what a relationship should look like and be like, because now you're exposed to these new people that are diverse, different from you, and I think it really forces you to grow as a person and get better at connecting with others. So.
Because for me, living back home, it's like, yeah, we do things the way my mom tells us to do things. But then when you're living with, for me, I lived at University Village, so I'm living with 3 other guys, and it's like, okay, well, now we get to kind of figure that out, and we get to kind of, hey, we all get to do our own thing, and then this is the, what we agree upon. And so having roommates for the first time was a very interesting experience for living with people that I'm not related to.
Yeah, and I think too, like I was just thinking as you were talking, Rayshawn, that you're also trying to figure yourself out, around
yeah.
that time, right? So you may also have grown up doing things a certain way, but now that you have this maybe new independence and this new, freedom, it also gives you a chance to sort of figure things out and be like, do I want to keep doing things that way?
Right.
And that's where like your roommates can be like even a source of ideas and creativity, because like you can really be like, oh, I didn't know you could do it that way. I didn't know you could go about it, this way. All I've known is this
Right.
one, and I like your approach. I want to do more of that, or vice versa. Or you can be like, you know what? I actually think the way I've been doing things is very healthy, and I want to keep doing it this
Right.
way. I don't want to do it the way you do it. So it can also be a good way to explore yourself as well.
What are some of the challenges you think a lot of students experience when they're trying to make new connections, whether they're professional, like you mentioned, or for a lot of new students who are just trying to make friends on campus? What are some of the challenges they may face, you think?
Gosh, relationships are risky.
Yeah.
I think I talk to my clients about that a good bit.
Yeah.
How much courage it takes to enter into relationships of any type, from professional to personal to romantic, friendships, whatever. Because we hurt each other, we judge each other, and it's a risk to enter into a relationship and try to trust other people. So I think, building trust with people you don't know, it takes a leap of faith to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree with that, Tracy. And also, I'm thinking too about how you have like all these different variables that can really challenge our relationship, or your ability to form one. Like you have distance, like you mentioned, you're not, from Augusta, like you were, and that's gonna add a new layer to how you're going to form relationships versus someone who has the advantage of being, from Augusta, right, when they're doing it. So international students, will have different challenges than other students. I think we have talked before about also even social media, and how that might bring this, layer into relationships. There comes some comparisons, right? Like you might be looking at other people and thinking, wow, they form friendships so quickly. Or you're looking at another student who's maybe doing research and you're like, how did they already start building this professional, connections, this professional portfolio? And it may be challenging because it can put some pressure on you, because now all of a sudden you may feel like students can feel like they have to catch up and they have to maybe even do more. And a lot of times social media, as we know, is not 100% accurate representations of people's lives. So yeah, you have these challenges of learning about relationships from other people, but not understanding fully the context of those relationships. You have long distance relationships happening, people adapting to a new environment if they're from out of town. So yeah, and I think that's not even all inclusive. I'm thinking about like all the other challenges that can come up when it comes to forming, relationships in college.
Yeah, it made me think of when I first came here, and I remember I came from a very small high school, and so for those that went to college, like small groups decided to go to the same college, so they can still kind of have like their built-in friends, and so for some of my friends that I had, like they were able, because there was like a duo or a trio, like they were able to make more friends a lot quicker than I was, because I was kind of more by myself, and kind of talking about comparison, I was like, oh wow. I wonder if I'm doing something wrong, because I'm still filling people out, and I'm still just I'm going to events, and I just haven't really felt comfortable posting up pics with like new friends yet.
Right.
So that's just like naturally that sense of comparison of like, am I doing something wrong, or do I need to work harder to make more friends, or work harder to build a network? When you see someone saying like, oh yeah, I published research, or I worked with this professor to do this cool thing, and you're like, I didn't even know that was
Right.
an option for
Which
me.
can be a great thing to learn, right?
Yeah.
To see and to learn. Oh, they can do it. I can do it too.
True.
The flip side of that
Right.
is they're doing it. I better catch up, like you said, right?
Yeah.
But another thing that I feel like comes with relationship changes are like friend breakups, which can be very painful because sometimes, having a close friend no longer be a part of your life can be just as painful as losing a family member or a romantic partner. And so I'm kind of curious if students kind of come to you guys with those type of concerns as well, like, oh, me and my best friend just went through something and we're not going to be able to recover.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, when it comes to relationships ending, there's like this spectrum because it could be something as, roommates having issues and you feeling like, you know what, we're not getting along. Yeah, like you were saying earlier, Rachana, about like, well, they do things this way, I do things that way. And sometimes that can build tension over time. So sometimes that can feel like this almost like breakup ending,
Yeah.
a relationship that's going to eventually happen because you feel like this tension just keeps building. But you also have friends who've been friends for a long time and now they are in college and you have all these stressors, from academics, but also, from becoming an adult.
Yeah.
Like that brings its own, set of challenges, and that can put strain on a relationship. And I'll also add in there as well that we get students come in because romantic relationships
Oh, yeah.
have taken a toll and they are ending. And that is always a challenge because anytime a relationship ends, naturally you start wondering, well, what was it that led to this relationship ending? And, and oftentimes, I will say, you look inward too, and you can ask, what was it about me that led to this relationship to end? And oftentimes, that's where we as counselors, come in when the questions start sounding like that. Like, what was it about me that led this relationship to end? And part of our job as counselors is to help students in a safe way explore those questions and hopefully connect with their inner wisdom that has the answer to that, but also a way to better look at things, and better also move forward, as they go on to form new relationships.
Thank you for that. Yeah, just to piggyback on that, in terms of our role as counselors and kind of the work we do, it's very relational.
Yeah.
I mean, we really are. I tell my clients, a big part of my job is to earn your trust. For you to do whatever work you want to do in here. And my job is to create a safe enough space. And I won't be able to do that for every student I get to meet with, but I hope someone is. And I always applaud them for just showing up and trying. Because it is hard to sit down with a stranger and talk about the things that are most important to you. And so the therapeutic relationship is one that can be healing for some people. When you find the right person to sit down across from and talk to about the things you need and want to do, the things that are working and not working, you can really come away with a belief in yourself. Oh, I can trust people. I can share parts of myself, not just the Instagram snapshots of myself. I can share a lot of myself with another human. And if I always tell my clients, if you can do that in here, my hope is that you'll do that out there and connect with people in more authentic, real, vulnerable sort of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think to plug in, counseling, right? I think that counseling, like Tracy is saying, it gives us this opportunity to also practice what it's like to have this healthy relationship. So so boundaries, are so important. And oftentimes, I think it is in college where you really start learning about like, okay, how do I communicate that I have this boundary that I don't want to cross, and how do I find the balance between getting what I want, but also making the other person happy and keeping this relationship, feeling good. And that can be really tough because oftentimes it feels like those can be almost like opposites. Like either I get what I want, or I keep the person happy, but I cannot do both. And counseling can also be a way to figure that out too. Like, what does that balance look like for you and for your relationship? And I will also add really quick too, speaking about like relationships ending and breakups. Oftentimes, there doesn't always have to be something that someone did wrong, because I think that oftentimes there can be like a blame aspect of it, like
Yeah.
who's to blame for the relationship ending, and sometimes it's not anyone's fault. I think one of the things that can be a learning opportunity in college is learning about how things change also over time. And Tracy and I were having a conversation the other day about how there can be seasons, to a
Yeah.
relationship, where sometimes just because where you are in life, things kind of slow down and maybe you're not having as much contact with that person. And it doesn't have to mean that there was like a fallout or that you just don't care for that person anymore. But I think realistically, sometimes because of whatever you have going on for work or school, maybe you don't have as much time or energy to invest in that relationship, and you may have to get more picky about like what you do with your time and your energy. But that relationship can still be there, and also if it does end, that can also be okay. That doesn't have to mean that you're a bad friend or you're like this person that just doesn't care, or on the other side of things that maybe they were a bad friend because they never checked in on you. It can also mean that it was just the time, for that relationship to end and for people to move on to maybe like a different friend group or a different type of thing.
What would you say are some indicators that, like, I think this relationship is coming to an end?
That's a good that's a good question. Yeah.
Because sometimes it's a feeling, but also there's sometimes it can be more than a feeling of just like, I think
Yeah.
we've kind of come to the end of the road.
As you were talking, I was thinking about one of my very best high school friends became my college roommate my first semester, and then I transferred to a smaller school for the spring semester and stayed there the rest of my college. And I was playing sports at the time, and at a new school, and she and I just drifted apart. There was no investment or intentionality about investing in the relationship. So, and that was so hurtful. I think I looked to her and said, why did you not reach out to me? And I wasn't reaching out either. So mutually, we had prioritized other things rather than the relationship. And so I think it does take an investment in the person, in the relationship, whether that's a phone call or a text or a snap, whatever it takes to stay in touch. And even those have some barriers, if suddenly someone you talk to every day just becomes a text on their birthdays.
Right.
That shows that the priorities have changed and the investment in the relationship has changed. And you're right, it doesn't necessarily mean someone's mad at someone else or that you're a bad friend, but priorities do change, and people do come and go in our lives.
Yeah. And I want to say, Rachel, because I know you mentioned feelings, like sometimes it can be a feeling that a relationship is ending. And sometimes oftentimes you have to listen to your emotions and, listen to your instinct, right? And people change, and that goes both ways. Like, you are changing as a person, especially in college, where you're being exposed to so many different ideas, so many different groups. you are going to change a bit. And also, the other person is changing as well. And it can come to a point where you are different enough that that relationship doesn't feel as maybe nurturing or as maybe as engaging as it once was. And you can get that feeling of like, I don't know, I feel like this relationship is kind of coming to an end, and you have to kind of like listen to that feeling too. It could also be other feelings too, like sometimes too much frustration, with the person, or anger. Anger can be a good signal, right? A good sign that something needs to change, and that could be this relationship needs to go. It could also be sadness, but I guess what I'm trying to say is like, don't minimize the feelings that you have when you're interacting with another person, because your feelings can tell you a lot about a relationship and whether that is a relationship that's worth fighting for and further building your connection with that person. But your feelings can also tell you a lot about, is this someone that maybe we are no longer compatible as friends and I need to let go of this relationship. So I would say definitely do listen to that feeling that you might get in your gut that's telling you like, this relationship may not be it anymore.
I think if a client came to me and said, they had this gut feeling, I would get really curious about that feeling, and I would wonder how they're communicating that to the other person.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, I have this feeling now. What do I do with it? Right? Do I just make assumptions? Do I make decisions about the relationship without even talking to the other person? I think those feelings are important, and then you can kind of determine what do I want to do with this? How do I respond to it?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm enjoying the conversation so far. For those watching, stay tuned because we'll be right back.
Hello, Augusta University. Karen and I want to take a moment to express our deepest gratitude for your unwavering support, patience, grit, and resilience during this challenging time in the wake of Hurricane Helene. This storm has certainly tested us in ways we could not have anticipated, but I'm also incredibly proud of how our entire community has come together to face these difficulties with strength, resolve, and solidarity. To our students, faculty, staff, and families, your safety has always been our top priority. We're actively working around the clock to restore our campus, making sure it is ready to welcome you back very soon. Our teams are working hard to assess the damage, and work is currently underway to ensure a safe return to our classrooms, our labs, and campus facilities. We will be providing additional detail on reopening campus and resuming instruction very soon. Please continue to check the university's social media platforms, your university email, and jaguar.augusta.edu/alert.
Russell and I have children who are currently in college. From the perspective of being parents, we want you to know that your children's safety and well-being are always at the forefront of our minds, especially in times of uncertainty. I have seen the tireless efforts of our faculty and staff, and I know that Augusta University will emerge from this stronger than ever. To all the parents, guardians, families, and loved ones, thank you for your trust in us. We are committed to taking care of your students just like we would our own.
I also want to acknowledge the incredible support we've received from so many of you. From our first responders, line workers, friends, and colleagues within the University System of Georgia, the Central Savannah River area, and around the entire state. Your efforts have been nothing short of extraordinary. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with all of you. In times like these, the spirit of JAG Nation shines the brightest. Together, we will rebuild, recover, and move forward stronger than before.
If you are experiencing needs as a result of Hurricane Helene, we want to help you find the resources you need, and in some instances may be able to connect you with others in our AU community who can provide assistance. An AU Cares webpage has been set up in an effort to help with such needs. From the AU Cares webpage, you can also let us know if you are interested in providing resources or volunteering to address the needs within our AU community.
Thank you for your continued trust, grace, and understanding. We can't wait to welcome all of you back home to Augusta University. Stay safe, and as always, onward and upward.
All right, welcome back. I have Yamil and Tracy, and we've been talking about relationship changes, in particular breakups, whether it's friend breakups, romantic breakups, and just kind of all of those changes that students might experience when they are emerging adults. I'm going to stick with that term. I'm going to keep that from you, Tracy. But I was wanting to share like my own experience with a relationship that ended in my life, even though it wasn't necessarily during my college years, but my roommate of many years at the time, we had met as students here, and we lived together for a number of a number of years, and then our relationship ended abruptly because for those that are watching, y'all probably have never heard this story before because I haven't really shared it too much, but we ended up getting evicted from our apartment because he unfortunately had lost his job, and he was keeping that from me for a number of months, and so he was kind of holding all of that in until he couldn't hide it anymore. And so that unfortunately kind of just ended our friendship, and that was a very interesting time period because I was losing a roommate that I thought was really great. Like we really clicked, I guess, in that sense of just like how we could live together, but also he was a close friend. So that was, so kind of going off of your story with your friend, of you and your friend kind of going your separate ways, like that kind of happened to me too, even though it happened a lot later after I had graduated college.
Sounds like whatever it was he was going through it without you.
Yeah.
And it really cost the relationship. And I'm sorry that happened to you. I think that's such a hard thing when relationships end so abruptly. You don't see it coming. You feel very close to the person, and then something dramatic happens that feels irreparable.
Yeah, and trust is so important, in a relationship. And I know people say this often, but I think it's because of a good reason, that trust is something that takes time to build, but it can be undone, so quickly. So I hear right that you feel like your trust was betrayed, in this relationship, like you had invested, and then this kind of like happened all of a sudden, and then sometimes it's so hard to rebuild that trust. And honestly, sometimes it's impossible. It's like you just can't figure out, like, I don't know if I can ever trust this person again. And once you feel that way, like you cannot really trust someone, it's so hard, to see any type of relationship with that person, because trust is so important.
And the communication piece. Trust is so wrapped up in how we communicate with one another. And this person wasn't communicating what they were going through with you. So you couldn't support them.
Right.
You couldn't make other plans for yourself in terms of where you would live. And, in some ways, he made decisions about the relationship without talking to you. That's hard.
Yeah, that's a big one. Making the decisions about the relationship without.
Yeah, it was no pun intended, like a wild chapter in my life. But I was curious of going back, like, do students typically come to you guys with things that are heavy like that, and how do you kind of support them through it? Because, for me, that was certainly an ongoing situation. And so I'm curious, like, how do you support students who say, like, hey, this happened to me in life, and I don't know how to navigate through this. Like, I need more support.
Absolutely. And to answer your question, yes, I think we get a good bit of students that come in expressing, concerns that are similar to what you've shared, and concerns that I think we can definitely say feel heavy, when they're expressed to us. When it comes to supporting someone who's going through something like that, oftentimes the question is, how do I move forward, now? And which is a really important and valuable question. But I think at first, supporting looks a lot like being present, for that student, and also helping that student almost like be present, with themselves, which may mean creating a space where you can process, your feelings about that situation. Because before you can move forward, you will really have to make space for all the different emotions that might be coming up there. Because when it comes to a relationship ending, there can be sadness, but there can be anger, and that can be you're angry at the other person, but you can also be angry with yourself because you can be like, how did I not see, that this person was like that? Like maybe there were like red flags and I just never saw the red flags. And now I'm looking back and I'm like, that was a red flag,
Right.
now that I think about it, yeah, they were doing it all along. So there can be sadness, anger, for like all these feelings, and if you don't give yourself the chance to process those feelings, I think you will bring those feelings oftentimes into the next relationship that you form. So support looks a lot like helping someone to sit with their feelings and process them, and then when you consider moving forward, it will be a lot about think about like what have you learned about yourself because of this experience, and what can you do differently moving forward, to keep yourself safe and to also, stick to your values, right? Because oftentimes it can feel like as a response to the loss of the relationship, you may feel like either you're not living up to your values or that other person violated your values, right? So we do have to talk a bit about that, when considering this idea of like, how do you move forward,
In speaking about this, you're really speaking about our relationships with ourselves, which I know we're talking a lot about relationships with others.
Yeah, that's good.
But we also have to pay attention to our own needs and wants. And I would say that so many students, I would say almost every concern can be linked to a relationship, whether that's a relationship with self, others, the world. So much of our suffering, to me, in my view, is linked to our relationships. And so much joy, pleasure, love is also linked to those things.
Right, 100%.
And so I guess on the flip side of that, what practical things would you have a student make note of if they say like, hey, I want to move forward and I want to focus on making new friends and I want to focus on finding new connections out there, not necessarily trying to repair a situation that I feel like needs to end, but now I'm looking forward to finding the next person. What advice would y'all kind of give them?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, the first thing that comes up for me, Emil, is how we don't want to sit in those feelings, how we don't want to feel that sadness, grief, frustration, anger. Like, we don't want to feel that. And so oftentimes we just want to focus on the next thing, right? And what you're suggesting is the healing part, right? And how do people move forward? And the healing, if we don't do the work of healing, and it is work to sit in that discomfort, to process, to talk about, but if we don't get it out of our bodies, out of our spirits, it can make us really sick.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very, very common for students to come into our office and say, I don't want to feel this way, I want to focus instead on making new friends and moving forward. And sometimes I think people can manage to do that and do it well. And sometimes I think we have to give a reality check in that you're hurting so much. It's going to be hard to put one foot in front of the other to do this next thing. And what has happened to you in the past is affecting your present. And this is actually where we live. But so often we don't want to live here because there's discomfort here. We just want to think about the next thing. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it kind of does. Because I'm one of those people where, like, okay, I know this is a crazy, dramatic experience that I'm having or I'm in the middle of, so I'm going to try to own all the things. And for me, what I find to be really helpful is trying to just like name my feelings. Because sometimes you're feeling it and you're just like, oh, I'm feeling bad or I'm feeling down, but then just sitting with those long enough to just say like, I'm feeling disappointment. Like this is exactly what I'm feeling, or I'm feeling betrayal. Going back to my roommate situation, or whatever those feelings are. Like I try to sit down, and sometimes I'll even like Google the definitions of emotion just to know like this is the exact thing that I'm feeling, because that kind of helps me a little bit to know like this is exactly what I'm feeling.
So valuable.
Yes, yes. As I was saying earlier, I think you can learn a lot from your feelings and your emotions, and feeling your feelings is so important. Making space for them. Anxiety, in particular, lives in the future, lives somewhat in the present, but anxiety is not about. I'm sorry, not the present. It lives in the future and lives in the past, but anxiety is often not about the present. It's not about what's right here in front of you. So I always thread carefully whenever we're talking about like what do I have to do next, because it's a fine line between preparing for the next relationship versus starting to build this anticipation and anxiety about the next thing. So if you start preparing like a list of like, I need to be this way, I need to say this, something, like that can be helpful, but you have to be careful because you're in the home court of anxiety, right? Which means that if you start preparing almost like too much, you can almost like feed into this anxiety about, I will likely get hurt again. That's why I'm doing all this preparation. So I think as part of feeling your feelings, in the present, is also recognizing that there's not a lot that you have to start doing in preparation, for the next relationship. And I say this because if you think about it, a lot of the most important relationships in your life probably happen kind of naturally, in that you didn't prepare, the environment. You didn't think out, each word you were going to say to that person. And so it is good to not put too much pressure on yourself on how this is how I have to be in the next relationship. This is what I have to look for. Because I think sometimes that pressure, instead of helping, ends up being what can sometimes even lead to like this self-fulfilling prophecy where you're like, I'm not going to be this friend. I'm not going to be this friend. And then you're preparing so much for it that all of a sudden you're like, I'm being that friend, like I'm doing the thing I said I wasn't going to do. So I think it's important, right, again, to make sure that you're not putting so much pressure on yourself because your trust has been betrayed, to catch it next time early, or to do all this work so that everything goes great. You have to, like Tracy was saying, that relationship with yourself, you have to trust yourself that it can be okay moving forward, and that the next relationship will bring new opportunities.
When you mentioned anxiety, that made me think of Inside Out too.
Oh yeah.
Have y'all seen it yet?
I'm trying really hard not to mention Inside Out. I was fighting it this whole time, so I'm so glad you read.
Yeah, I thought that was a great depiction of anxiety and kind of the effect that it does have on our brain. No spoilers for those that are watching, but yeah, I think it depicted that emotion quite well.
Yes, and I think again, as you were saying, no spoilers, but I think it gives you Inside Out. It gives you like this glimpse into this idea that all emotions are trying to help in their own way.
Yeah.
So anxiety doesn't mean to hurt, and oftentimes like we get the feeling of anxiety, and immediately we want to get rid of it because we think bad, this hurts, But we can learn, from anxiety, and learning doesn't mean that you have to listen and do everything anxiety says, right? But that you can inform yourself and better prepare maybe for some situations. So I don't think we're sponsored by Inside Out, but I highly recommend that movie just as a fun way of like learning about how you can actually end up having a relationship with your emotions.
I wanted to say, when you were talking earlier about when you experience intense emotions that you try to identify them, to name them. And Inside Out movies help you to do that, help us to do that. For you, what is the benefit of checking in with yourself and saying, oh, that's disappointment that I'm feeling?
For me, or in my mind, it's like once I identify the exact name, like I said, sometimes I'll even Google it to be like, yep, this disappointment is defined as this, da 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 da. It's like, okay, well, let me maybe talk to someone about how they handle disappointment, or what do I think will make me feel better because this is what I'm actually feeling. Because sometimes when it's like, oh, I'm sad, I'm just going to do something that cheers me up. But then when you kind of do the work and narrow down what you're feeling, it kind of helps you kind of prepare your action plan, so to speak, of how you want to follow it up. Because when I'm disappointed, sometimes I want to have a conversation with the person and kind of say like, hey, this is where I feel like you let me down. And then I feel a whole lot better versus just watching Inside Out for another time, because that'll also make me happy, but it won't necessarily address my disappointment, if that makes sense.
I think it does. And for you to be able to say, when I'm disappointed, I might want to talk about it, to know what you need, and then you can get your needs met. Only when you know, like, oh, I'm disappointed, I really need to talk about this with someone and tell them how their actions affected me.
Right.
And then you can start to take care of those emotions and those relationships. So there's so much value in what you're doing. We do so much of that work with our clients, and you don't have to enter into counseling to learn to check in with yourself and label your feelings and kind of identify your needs and wants.
So switching gears a little bit from managing relationships, because that's super important, and like you said, Tracy, it kind of affects all parts of our lives. Right now, a lot of our students may be experiencing different type of stressors, not necessarily relationships with like a friend, but maybe academics or might be school. Do you have any like just best practices there of just dealing with being a college student and taking care of those stressors of taking care of assignments, showing up to class, those type of things? Because I feel like y'all handle that a great deal.
Yeah, 100%. And Tracy, you are, I think, are the pro at this. But I'll introduce the idea of like, there are different things that make you who you are, right? Like you have a body, you have this mind, right? Like this sense of self, right? And sometimes we even introduce this idea of like you have this spirit, and that doesn't have to be in like a religious sense, but in that I think when we say spirit, we're talking about what are the things that make you feel a sense of purpose, or the things that bring you meaning, right? The things that like truly matter. So when it comes to handling, stress, I think it takes checking in on all those different areas, so not just what can you do for your mind, right? But what can you do for your body right now to help your body process all that stress and anxiety that you're going through? Or when was the last time you checked in with your spirit, which can mean when was the last time you did something that felt meaningful, to you? Because, Rachel, like you're saying about college, it can be a lot of work,
Right.
and all of a sudden, you had all these things that you used to do, but now you feel like you don't have time, to do these things. And there can also be this thing that happens where there's so many maybe tests, assignments, all this stuff going on, and you can almost like fall into a routine where you maybe go to school, go home, study, eat, sleep, go to school, go home, and then all of a sudden, like there are these other parts of you that are not getting nurtured anymore because you're kind of like mainly nurturing the academic side of you. But there are all these things that make you who you are. And I think when it comes to, being able to handle stress, it takes checking in on those and seeing like which area right now is maybe not getting as much energy from me, and maybe I can dedicate a little bit more time to that area just to bring up, my energy, or give me that extra boost I might need to get through the week.
Well said. Yeah, we're holistic beings, and there are chapters and seasons in our life where one area of our life gets the most of our energy, attention. And it doesn't come without a cost. I mean, we make sacrifices to get master's degrees and other graduate and professional degrees, and even undergraduate degrees. We sacrifice a lot, and our bodies, our minds, and our spirits are going to tell us when it's missing something. When you said go home, study, eat, sleep, repeat, I'm like, you ate and you slept. I'm so glad for you. Because those are so important to your well-being. And I think often we sacrifice those when we're in school. And we think it's out of necessity, and it might be. The last thing I want to do with students is to put more pressure on them. You need to do more, than what you're doing. But the time investment can be minimal. The time that we're scrolling, we could be out in nature, looking at something, breathing fresh air, really communicating with an important person. But I would also say, so I typically talk to students about eating, sleeping, and moving, and I call those 3 pillars of well-being. But I'm missing a lot of parts. I'm especially missing the people part. I'm like, don't go through that alone. We do need each other. We are built for connection, and we need relationships to keep us well.
Yeah.
And to give our life meaning.
For sure. You're very real for saying that, Tracy, too, that self-care doesn't have to be this, you need to do this, you need to do that. No, it become like a new to-do list, because I think then it ends up not being self-care. It ends up becoming maybe like a new stressor in a way. And I think we get that with some students where they feel like they're doing self-care wrong because they have all these rules about like, does that count? Does that not count? And self-care can sometimes definitely be maybe even not doing something, right? Which
100%.
that sounds easy when we talk, about like take a break. But it's not only this challenge of time, right? Which, like Tracy said, it's okay if it's like a minimal break, right? But I think, Tracy, you did the motion of like scrolling.
Right.
A lot of students think that that's a break. Like, oh, I was just laying in bed scrolling on my phone. And I'm like, yeah, maybe your body, was, not moving, but your mind is taking on a lot of content, and especially. And a lot of sites today, like TikTok, name, any site, a lot of it is built to keep you engaged, right? To keep your attention. So you might think that you're getting a break, because you're just scrolling, through social media. But the truth is that your brain is not getting a break at all. And that's why you might come out of that so-called break session still feeling maybe tired or emotionally exhausted. So the art of boredom, and doing nothing for a break can sometimes be easier said than done, for sure.
For those who, before I let you guys go, for those who are unfamiliar with student counseling and are curious about setting up an appointment or just learning more about your office, do you want to give kind of like a brief overview before I let you go?
I would love to. We are growing. We added 3 new counselors this spring, and we have 3 counselors on the Health Sciences campus in the Student Center, and then we have 6 clinicians on the Somerville campus. We also are a training site, so we have a doctoral intern, and we will have a new master's intern in the fall. And we offer brief counseling. And my view of that is it's appropriate for many people. And there's lots of misinformation about how many sessions do I get? Is that going to be enough? And what I would say to that is up to you and your counselor to decide how many sessions you need for how long you're going to meet. And, your counselor may say, we're going to meet this number of times. Here's what we're going to do along the way. And I think it's important for students to know that the average is 4 to 6, and that can be self-selected. That can be the therapeutic recommendation. But our job as counselors is to get you to a place where you don't really need us. And part of our job is also to get you connected with other resources, whether that's our weekly group counseling program or a provider outside of the university. And, we want to get your needs met. And so all you would do is give us a call, schedule a triage if you've not met with us in a while or have never met with us. We'll do a brief phone call you'll do a brief phone call with one of the clinicians and to determine kind of what your needs are and how we could be helpful to you or what other resources are available to you. And then we would determine what way to go from there. We do offer crisis services Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And students can meet with a clinician without an appointment. And the point of that appointment is just to get you through the crisis immediately, the immediate crisis you're in. And after hours, we would just encourage students to use the 24/7 AU line or just call 988, and they'll get you connected with local resources. What did I miss?
I think you got it, Tracy. I would say that, for all students, right, like we see a plethora of concerns. So there's no small concern, I think that's something we hear often, that I don't think my concern is big enough for counseling, So my recommendation, Rayshawn, would be to just call. And sometimes students feel the pressure that they need to know what they need or want, right? And I think sometimes just scheduling that triage call, as Tracy said, and exploring that with a counselor, that's a helpful start. So I would say, when it comes to scheduling an appointment or getting started with counseling, the first step is just to call. You don't need to prepare anything beforehand. You don't need to figure anything out. It is that call with us that, will help you get started and will help you find what it is that you need, whether that is individual therapy, like Tracy mentioned, all these different resources, group therapy, an emergency appointment, will help you figure that out. But I would say the most important thing is just call, if you feel like it will be good to talk to someone.
Well, thank you guys again for being here. Thank you for all that you do for our students. And I can't wait to have you guys come back on the show.
Thank you for having us.
It was really fun.
Yeah, for
Good
sure.
job, Emil.
Good job, Tracy.
Okay, y'all, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. I always love talking to our folks at SCAPS. That's what we call student counseling. It's the acronym. So don't think I'm calling them any weird names. But yeah, like talking to them is always enlightening. For me, like I said, being able to name my emotions, being able to talk to someone, whether you are struggling with navigating a relationship change, whether a new one or a relationship that is ending, feel free to rely on student counseling. Those services are here for you. They provide free counseling sessions. Don't have to have insurance. If you aren't insured or underinsured, it's okay. You can always reach out to them regardless of your circumstances and try to get some sort of resource or the help that you need. So I hope you take advantage of them. And I hope to hear from you guys. So if this episode helped you in any sort of way, let us know. I really would love to get some feedback. So like, subscribe, do all of the things that to do to let me know that you enjoyed this episode. And until then, I will see you guys in the next one. Go Jags!